I'm Zach.
And I'm Darcy.
We're an LDS couple who struggled with unwanted pornography in our marriage for many years. What was once our greatest struggle and something we thought would destroy us has become our greatest blessing and triumph.
Our hope is that as you listen to our podcast each week, you'll be filled with hope and healing and realize that you too can thrive beyond pornography and create the marriage you have always desired.
Welcome to Thrive Beyond Pornography.
We're so glad you're here and we believe in you.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Thrive Beyond Pornography. My name is Zach Spafford. I'm your host. And this week on the podcast, we are playing a recording that we did with Taylor Chambers at taylorchambers.com. He has a program he did this, I think it was in October, where we did a porn resilience conference. And it was a great opportunity for us to talk about our philosophy on how it is that we help couples resolve their pornography struggles. And part of that is taking greater responsibility, working on your side of the street. But I would love to share this with you, and feel free to share it with your friends. We love doing this work. We're grateful for you guys and for everybody out there who has shared this podcast to somebody who needs it. And if you don't know, if you know somebody who needs it, you probably all you have to do is go and ask about 5 people in your circle, and 3 of them will be like, yeah, I totally need that. Thanks. So feel free to share this. Love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
Hey everybody, welcome to this interview in Porn Resilient, the pilgrimage from unwanted porn use to fearless sexuality. And today I am joined by the Spaffords. Thanks guys for being here. Appreciate it.
Hey.
Yeah. So I met with you guys last year for an interview, and just really came to love how you approach you guys approach pornography with a lot of authenticity, kind of with your own story, and a lot of wisdom and kind of like how to navigate it. And so hoping that this discussion today kind of takes us one step further from the previous year's conversation. I'm sure it will. So yeah. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with the Spaffords, we've got Zach and Darcy here. And you guys are life coaches specializing in pornography. And you offer a program called Thrive Beyond Pornography.
Yep.
And then a podcast by the same name, Thrive Beyond Pornography. And so, yeah, definitely recommend checking those things out. And you'll get a taste of kind of their viewpoint and everything today. So,
very cool.
All right.
Yeah, we love talking about porn. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I know that there are so many couples out there that are struggling that it's just fun to talk about something that you can really make an impact and change people's lives with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and you guys make it fun too. You tend to not keep it too heavy or serious. And I think that helps people get momentum and get things going. So, well, so now, I mean, this isn't the heart of the conversation, but you guys work as a couple. You guys have navigated, the dilemma of pornography as a couple. And now that you're kind of in this new stage of life of working together, it's been a while, but what's the best part? What's the good stuff? What's the hard stuff of being a team?
I think as far as like the work that we do, we love doing it as a couple because Zach at first started doing it where he just was focusing on the men.
Yeah.
But when we brought the wife into the picture and the couple into the picture, being able to facilitate those conversations and create a huge impact, I think is probably the most rewarding thing that we do. And as far as just like the day-to-day work, Zach mostly does most of the day-to-day work. I mostly take care of the kids and homeschool, but it's been good.
There's a lot of just function stuff that you got to get done, like posts and emails and all the stuff that I wish that I could, hand off to an EA, and that will probably come in the future. But the truth is, the work that we do together, the most rewarding part about it is when we sit down with a couple and they are having a struggle and we're able to, from both perspectives, really dial in on what's going on and help them start to move through that. And one of the things that's really great about having Darcy as a part of this conversation is that there are things that she can say to the wives that I can't.
Yeah, right.
She has a perspective, she has the experience, she has the sense of what it is that's actually going on for them that I don't have. Not because I haven't been paying attention, but because from a woman's perspective, it's different than from a man's perspective. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And when we sit down with those couples and we're like, all right, tell us the story, what's going on? She really has this capacity to dial in on where that wife is. Usually it's a wife, and really help her come out of this tragic space into, oh, wait a minute, I can actually not just like my husband and enjoy being around him, but start to create a thriving marriage beyond this struggle that we endure.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, you guys can approach it from different angles, and especially because you've been open with your story, your clients know that, hey, this is something that each of you has gone through. I imagine that's incredibly powerful for people. So
yeah, I mean,
the toughest part. What's the toughest part?
What's the toughest part?
When I don't post on social media.
Okay. When you don't keep the cadence.
Darcy's
I hate social media. I'm like, it's like so much of what people post on there is just fake, and so I just I just want nothing to do with it. But
I see.
Probably the toughest part is just when we disagree, which I mean, right? Isn't that? I feel like that's any couple that works together.
Yeah,
that's any couple that lives together at any time in any like set of circumstances. Like disagreements are just part of the course. Being able to navigate those emotionally, intelligently, and without making it about you. That's the work that everybody does. And
totally. Yeah, my wife and I, we share maybe a similar balance of like, I lead in a lot of the forward-facing elements and do the direct coaching and everything. But she does so much to support this whole thing, existing. And for us, the toughest part is just like, is this yours or is this mine? And if it's yours, how do we coordinate the time with little ones?
And renegotiating that at times, right? Like, hey, I thought you were doing this.
Yes.
Oh, wait, you're not? Okay. Hey, I it's important to me, so I'll take it on.
Right. Yeah. That can get tricky. So,
yeah.
Well, but yeah, I mean, that's relationships in general, right? Just figuring out how to navigate things together is part of the whole thing. So, well, because I have you guys as a couple, a lot of our discussion is going to center on relationships and all of that. And so, I guess I want to start with just that beginning stage of like, pornography can kind of wreak havoc on a couple. And so when somebody's relationship is on the rocks or when it's really rough because of pornography, where's a starting point? Like where do you try to guide couples to in terms of stabilizing and getting that first step underway?
So it's interesting because we see couples all along the spectrum, right? Where it's just poop just hit the fan and crisis mode to we've been dealing with this for 27 years.
Yeah.
We just need the next step. So I think with each couple, it's different where you start, right? Depending on where they are. But I think for the couples that when it just is revealed or it's just happened again, right? They maybe knew about it before they got married, but now they're married and, it's still there, right? Sex didn't solve the problem. That part, when it's in the beginning, it a lot of what we do is really a reframing of the struggle and what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I think for a lot of us, we've received a lot of really negative messages about porn and what porn does to your marriage and what it means and all of those things. When we get those couples just in the beginning, even just like a hour-long conversation with me oftentimes can give just a different groundwork to get going on versus so much of that crisis. Like for us, we like to kind of take all the doom and gloom out of it and just say, okay, like let's get the facts. What's really going on? Let's look at this from a objective point of view and let's see where we can make some adjustments.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. So a lot of the times you're just like helping them like, here's maybe a useful way to see this situation, which might be different than the way that you are naturally seeing the situation.
Yeah. There's no way to take away the pain in the beginning. It's important to acknowledge that usually the wife is deeply upset that for her, this can be anything ranging from, I really don't like this behavior, to all the way to they feel like they've been cheated on. And understanding their perspective along that spectrum and helping do three things. One, create a perspective that is tenable, something that everybody can agree on and understand what is actually happening here.
Yeah.
Taking the right actions. So not just taking action, but taking the right actions. So committing to things that are doable, committing to learning through this process, committing to understanding what's going on for your partner, and making sure that as much as possible, you're not making what is happening on the other side of the street about you. And of course, that's tough, because when a wife thinks that they've been cheated on, it is about them. And that is a difficult position. And it's understandably, it's a place where very few people want to come back from. And just kind of rearranging that perspective, taking the right actions, not promising more than you actually have the capacity to do, and then willingness to go through the process, having the willingness to actually sit down and go through what's going on for each of you on each of your side of the streets, and be uncomfortable for a while. Because the reality is, Esther Perel talks about it, every single marriage goes through 3 to 5 different marriages, right? Everybody's married to 3 to 5 different people in their lifetime, even if they never get married to a different person. I would say that Darcy and I are on at least our third marriage to each other. Like, we've never been married to anybody else. But having the willingness to acknowledge what that is, mourn what it was, and move into the next marriage it's tough. And it can be difficult for a couple to do that if they're consistently looking at the other side and saying, you did this, we're broken, it's your fault, and you have to fix it. So to stabilize, we have to be willing to, again, just stand on our side of the street, be willing to look at maybe a different perspective, even if it isn't one that justifies us or confirms our biases. Look at a different perspective, take different actions, and be willing to endure the discomfort that's going to come along with that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's kind of hopeful too to recognize that marriages have iterations and different versions.
I think in the beginning it's so hard, because it's like the marriage that you thought you had or that you were going to have looks different. And whether it's pornography or maybe financial troubles or kids, right? Like infertility, like all the things that we think our life is going to be and look like, when it doesn't come to that, it's hard, right? It's really hard to deal with those emotions and mourn the loss of what we thought we would have, right?
Yeah. I'm with you though, because when we can kind of see where we're at and undergo that grieving process and acknowledge, we can deconstruct how we've had it set up and reconstruct something new. I know that, I don't know, maybe we're in the third, maybe we're still trying to get into the third marriage, but we're like, there's some things that I'm having to actively like undo, like some of the things that I need to unlearn. And yet when we do that, it creates space for like kind of finding this new way of relating, kind of entering a new phase. It's painful. And so a lot of times we do resist it. We kind of like try and stay out of it, try and get back to the way things, either were or the way that we dreamed them to be. And yet there is something about like leaning in and moving through it rather than trying to recapture something that was lost.
Yeah. Another thing I see a lot is trying to get back to status quo and kind of sweeping it under the rug, right? Like some couples want to try and pretend it's not there and let's just move on and, let's not talk about it and let's just move forward. But that's not going to solve the problem either, right? It's just like, it just comes up 20 years later and it's like, oh, wow, we didn't deal with this. It's still there. I thought we just fixed it by not talking about it,
Yeah. Great point. Yeah. Just ignoring it means that it continues, like it keeps us in that version of marriage, which often has its own ramifications of disconnection or loneliness or whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think stabilizing the relationships. I mean, as all of the things go, stabilizing the relationship may not be the first move. It may simply be asking yourself, am I willing to do this work? And not necessarily saying, okay, I need everything to be back to a certain place, but just saying, do I have the will, do I have the desire to stay with this person and not change my life in a extremely dramatic way? And that's an important question, because one, it says, okay, what direction am I going? But two, it really is empowerment. It's about, I'm choosing this. And if I can take this on as a choice, then it's different than I'm stuck. And I think a lot of wives in particular feel stuck. They may have taken on the role of the homemaker and not necessarily have their own income, and also don't necessarily want to upset the comfort that they have, the comforts that they have in their life. Right. And as a result, they might think, oh, I'm stuck with this person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are willing to answer the question honestly, am I willing to do the work to stay, or willing to do the work of re-engaging this relationship? That can be really empowering and really put you in a position to say, I own this decision and I can stay or go. It's up to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it might seem a bit ironic, but a lot of the couples I work with, it is just like, hey, full permission. If you guys need to end this marriage, that's going to be okay. But we're going to work together so that each of you grows, whether it's together or we try and do our best to separate appropriately.
Yeah, because the truth is, what happens if you don't grow through this process? You just walk into the next marriage and you're the same person.
Yeah.
And the same sorts of challenges are going to infect that relationship as well.
Yeah. Well, and research bears that out. We very much are relationally patterned. And so we do have our tendencies to be drawn to particular types of people, and not inherently problematic unless we're trying to kind of avoid the growth that is maybe inherent in that kind of relationship formation. So,
well, and the truth is how often people look at porn. The statistics are pretty dang high. So, I mean, your chances of leaving one marriage where porn was a struggle does not guarantee that you're not going to hop into another marriage where porn is also a struggle. Because we've had couples that are on a second marriage and they're dealing with pornography, and they're like, I want this one to end differently than the first one did, and I'm willing to now like step in and I want to make this work. And so it's kind of interesting.
I heard this joke the other day. You said, I want this marriage to end differently. And I heard this joke the other day. It basically was, all successful marriages end in death.
I guess
that's a really morbid thought, I think.
That's how we're trying to end ours, I guess.
We could have started on.
That's right. Opening joke right there.
And I dare you to start your next interview with that. So and just like carry that through all the rest of your interviews.
Okay. It'll be our running gag. Well, so actually I wanted to highlight like the courage it takes to, we're talking about just, leaning in and working with the momentum of it's time to grieve, time to make changes. It takes a whole lot of guts. I mean, this is a very difficult process. And so anytime somebody chooses that, I really respect that, and know that it's not like I don't necessarily assume that everyone will choose it. That's a big ask.
Sure.
But a lot of people do. A lot of people will really prefer the hard work for greater life satisfaction, and which makes sense on paper, right? I mean, that looks like the right answer, but in the day-to-day experience, that can get really, really messy. It can get really, really tricky. So
I know for me, it took a lot of years to actually lean in to growing and owning the things that I could work on. Because everyone around me was like super validating of me and my position as like a poor wife who's dealing with her husband who struggles with porn, right? Like, I could get everyone on my team.
And yet that didn't push toward the growth
that was causing me to stay stuck.
Right. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Well, so let's kind of break it down. So if you are like, I guess, what does it take to be a good partner, like relate well when you have hurt your partner? Like, what does that individual need to be doing or focusing on in order to, help the relationship heal?
Want me to go?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
I think it's a good question to ask, right, to the person who was hurt. What is it that the person who is hurting you can do effectively?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because I know where I am now, and I know what I would say now. But I think in that moment, I really, like, for me, what I really wanted him to say was, I'm sorry. I'm going to own this. I did this, and I'm going to take the steps to change this. And I think in the beginning, because I was so hurt and he was trying to so much manage my feelings, he like overpromised things that he couldn't deliver on.
Sure.
And that ended up leading to more hurt. He would like, I promise I'm not going to look at porn again, and all those things. And of course, in that moment, it felt good. And I like soaked it all in, like, okay, good. He's committed now, right? Like he sees my pain. He's really committed now. It's really going to change. But then it didn't. And then the hurt just felt even worse. So I think part of it is just really taking ownership for the ways in which you have hurt your partner. But I think it's so hard because it's like, for most of these men, pornography has been a struggle that they've struggled with well before marriage. And so it's like, I don't think that these men who are struggling with porn are intentionally trying to hurt their partner. I think every once in a while, like sometimes, right, you come across it and someone's being resentful and they're using porn as a weapon, right?
Right.
But a lot of the men that we interact with, like, they're genuinely they're deeply pained by their interactions with pornography. And so I don't think they're setting out there to hurt their partner. Now, because you are in a partnership, your actions do affect your partner. Because I like to say we're not robots, right? We're not just, and so that's where it gets tricky. It's owning that your behavior is affecting your partner, but also realizing that your behavior, like their actions, are not about trying to hurt you.
Yeah, I think it's this really funny two-way street. Number one is it's not about you, Gary. And I know that really does sound harsh. But the truth is, when I was choosing porn, it was never about Darcy. And a lot of wives, a lot of people, they start in that space and they're like, well, why can't he just think about me? And the truth is, he's not thinking about you, not because he doesn't love you, but because he is in pain and he is trying to figure out how to deal with that. And that is that's the whole process. And for most of these people, before they were with their wives, they were in that same space of, I don't know how to cope or manage or deal with my own discomforts at all kinds of different levels, whether it's deep stress or it's just boredom. And in the process of learning how to deal with that, I came across this coping mechanism that I know can create good feelings right now for a period of time. And so that has become this way of dealing with their discomforts. Now, that's not how it feels. And we always have to acknowledge that, because it's important to recognize that when I was choosing porn, Darcy was deeply distraught by my choices. So on the one hand, it's about getting the right perspective. But on the other hand, it's about, well, as the person who has struggled with this behavior, the actions that I can take, the things that I can do to move forward, they're not the same things that I've been doing up to this point. So I have to be willing to shift. I have to be willing to look at this differently. I have to be willing to try new things. If you're building a house and it starts to fall down and you have to build another house, you're going to do things differently the next time. You're going to look at it and go, what failed? What was broken? Why did it break? I use this analogy all the time with my clients. In your job, when something goes wrong, what do you do? And almost invariably, there's some sort of standard operating procedure where they go and they look at what happened, why it happened, and assess how they could do it differently so that in the future it doesn't occur again.
Right.
That's a pretty normal way of dealing with problems. When it comes to pornography, often what we do is we try to distance ourselves from the issue mentally and emotionally as quickly as possible so that we don't have to feel bad that we're not living up to our own standard. That way of dealing with problems is ripe for re-engaging that same problem over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So as the partner who has hurt someone, it really has to be about looking internally and going, what is it that is going on here that I need to make a shift on?
It sounds like you guys kind of both mentioned this theme of ownership. Like, it wasn't so much, Darcy, the reassurance or the promises that made the long-term difference, but there was something about ownership. And Zach, you're mentioning like, hey, maybe the best thing that you can do for your partner is to go inward and do something new and different to address this in a more solid way.
Yeah, and when you say go inward, I just want to make sure that nobody takes that as withdrawing from your partner.
Okay, right. Good clarification. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that is how that's what feels most comfortable. Trying to stay away from them so that you don't feel the hurt that they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's tough. It's tough to do. It's tough to, I remember specifically there was a time when I messed up and Darcy said to me, I don't know if I can stay in this relationship. And it was tough. It was a really, really tough moment. And I just said, I get it. I know where you are. I understand why you're where you are because I have made this choice. I'm going to choose to stay. I'm going to choose to be in. And I'm going to support you in whatever you choose. That was tough. That was a really tough moment because it was me not worrying about my own needs, not worrying about how I felt, and choosing closeness with her in spite of the hurt that was going on in that moment. Yeah. And I think that was the right move. Was it the right move?
Well, it's a powerful stance to take. It's acknowledging, it's practicing that empathy, but still kind of claiming what it is that you ultimately want, which is like, no, I want this to work with us. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I guess then we'll kind of ask the flip side of that question. And, what does it take to be a good partner essentially when you've been hurt by someone? We've talked about that ownership idea, but what's the best way of relating while you're in that hurt position?
So I like to say, it's like we all say it, right? Hurt people. Right. And so it's like, super cliche, whatever, but it's true, right? Like
all of coaching is just cliches over and over and over again.
Like, like you think about the bully at school, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to wonder what's going on for that kid.
Right.
Like, there's something under that bullying, right? Like it's real that kid bullying that kid is really not about the kid that's being bullied. Right.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Like for me, I like to think about, okay, what is going on for my partner? Like why does he keep choosing this behavior when I know it goes against his values and who he wants to be?
Mm-hmm.
And how can I be a support to that, to him making the steps that he needs to take and knowing that I can't make him do anything, which I think is the hardest problem for the wives. Like I've worked with women that have, said, I've gotten 2 boob jobs and I've done this and I've done that. And they literally look like a supermodel on the other side of the screen. Right.
Yeah.
And their spouse is choosing pornography still. And it's like, it's because it's not about you. Like there's nothing you can do to make your husband stop looking at porn. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
if there was, we would not have this problem.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because women would solve it. We're
women
like,
would be like, all right, you are not looking at porn anymore. Done.
Yeah.
Problem
right.
solved.
Like right. Like, but part of that is, it's like, sometimes I think if we can take ownership and think that we can solve it, it gives us a false sense of control.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, if I can somehow help my partner not hurt and not choose porn, then I have the reins, right? Like I can control this and I can make it better for both of us. But what I had to learn is that all I could do is love him and choose him and support him and encourage him and be positive. Like as best I could. And also still expressing my feelings, right? Because it doesn't work to just like sweep your feelings under the rug too. But I think the more I was able to separate his behavior from me in all the ways, right? Like really separate it. Like really understand, okay, this really doesn't have anything to do with me, all the way down, like all the levels. Because I think I always hear wives say, I know it's not about me, a lot of times. I know it's not about me. But like underneath and through the conversation, it still comes out that there's a little bit in them that thinks maybe it has something to do with me, right?
Yeah.
Well, it still feels like it is about them. The framing that we often take is externally focused. And the work that you did was so much more than just like being supportive of me. It was getting to a place mentally and emotionally where you were solid and self-validated, and you're like, I'm going to say this, I'm effing hot. And if he doesn't want to have sex with me and he'd rather go do that, that's on him. I don't really like, I don't see it, but it's not about this because I am amazing, right? And that is a position of empowerment. That's a position of being solid in yourself to where you can choose in and not let the disorganization and the anxiety of your spouse be the problem and be so externally focused. That was one of the biggest components of what you did when you were the hurt person. And this, by the way, this took a long time. This wasn't like overnight. I wish we'd have had a coach. I wish we'd have had somebody who could walk us through this process, because it didn't just happen. It
was
took
a 5
years.
It was a 5-year process.
Yeah.
It
It took years of us
It was long.
doing a lot of research, doing the work, failing at it miserably, and not having anybody to say, well, this is what you should be seeing or could be seeing that you can't see because you're inside the bottle. And for you, being the hurt party, once you came to that position of, I'm awesome, and when he chooses porn, it's not about me, you could still be disappointed, but you didn't make it never became this knockdown, drag out fight again.
Yeah. So there's the active work of reframing, and as you mentioned, it's going beyond the intellectual and kind of all the layers. And Zach, that's what you're talking to as well. Just like, in many ways, it's an invitation for a hurt partner to really pay attention to the relationship with himself, heal it up, solidify it, because that positions you to handle the stuff that's outside of your control, which is your partner's behavior.
Well, and it's kind of interesting, and maybe I'll bring it up because I brought it up on an interview we did with JFF, and I've had multiple people bring it up to me.
Yeah.
But like, I noticed 2 things, right? Like for a lot of the women that struggle, it comes down to 2 things: lack of control and self-confidence issues, right? Like porn just amplifies those 2 struggles that I think women inherently are born with, right? Like self-confidence, body image issues, like I swear it just like comes with birth, right?
Yeah.
And it starts young, and it's been a struggle for almost all women. It doesn't matter if they're a size, perfect or not, right? Like it's just there no matter. I feel like.
Is that a technical description of sizes? Size perfect and not?
Yeah, whatever, whatever we have in our minds. But if I say, what if your spouse was looking at 1,000-pound women porn? Let's just go like super extreme, right? How might that feel different? And how might you interact with that struggle differently than you are now? And oftentimes the women are like, I'm really curious about that. Right? Like they get to a place of curiosity and understanding so much quicker. Because in that moment, they are not thinking about that they are not enough, or that they can't measure up, or they can't compete with that, or all of those ideas that naturally come when porn is in the marriage.
I like that it turns it on its head, and it kind of makes you like, pornography really does kind of naturally push against some of the pain points that women are naturally experiencing. But just like, for, again, to continue kind of with the gendered discussion, like for the men, this existed before the marriage, and for women, there are issues that existed before the marriage that are now being pressed against. And so, yeah, for both, it's an invitation to like, hey, we came together and now we're hurting each other and it feels crappy. And now we get to look back at what we brought into this and kind of heal that up. And so I like that you guys kind of approach it where everybody has their work to do, and by refocusing on kind of the personal work, it can support us in getting out of that kind of blame game. And like, if you would just be different, then I wouldn't have to go to porn. And if you would stop going to porn, then I would feel better about myself or whatever it might be.
Yeah, if only there was an externality that could solve all our problems, like a magic pill. But there isn't.
Yeah.
The problem is that all of us, humans in general, we want something that will solve our problems. This is why marketing works so well, because it shows us an image of what could be, right? I remember as a kid, beer commercials, right? It's always a party. All the people were hot at the party, right? And never was there like a gross,
somebody barfing in the toilet.
a gross scene where you see the aftermath of a night of drinking. You never see that because what we are looking for is the thing that will make us feel good right now, regardless of how we feel. And what we really need to do is we need to do the work of figuring out how to feel good, maybe at a lower level, but over a more consistent period of time. And that struggle is tough because we all want to just pick up our phones and get a hit of dopamine, and nobody wants to go to the gym. And those two things, they have similar chemical structures, but what they differ in is the amplitude in the moment versus over time. So the amount of chemicals you're getting in a short period of time versus the amount of chemicals you get over a long period of time. And the more we go to the gym and work out, the more we do the ice baths, which is a fun, I don't know if you've seen that stuff. That's crazy, right? Where you get into an ice bath like for 10 minutes a week, and all of a sudden you have a better serotonin and dopamine receptor level over a longer period of time. Your body, burns fat better, all kinds of things, right? All of that to say, I'm not willing to do what's hard right now to have a happy, more long-term feeling in my life. And we have to flip that on its head. We have to be willing to say, well, what can I struggle with right now that will give me better happiness over time? And very few people want to do that work. I don't want to do that work.
Yeah, right.
It's my job to talk about this, and I don't want to do that work.
Yeah.
So don't feel bad about that. Just be willing to say, okay, can I change that?
Yeah, right.
Well, and it's taking action towards what you do want, even if you don't want to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to eat off. I hate doing dishes, but I want to eat off clean silverware and plates and, all the things. So I do the dishes anyways because I value having clean dishes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tapping into a higher desire, a more long-term desire. But yeah, there are those natural barriers, the discomfort and resistance that comes up. But being willing to kind of move through the barriers, move through that resistance. That really is where we yield a lot of our growth and satisfaction. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so in the midst of all of this, are there particular thoughts or encouragement for couples about how they communicate to each other about this issue? Like where to focus or practices, or maybe it's unique to each couple?
Yeah, there's a lot to do around communication. I think the issue most often is when Darcy was coming to me to ask me about my pornography struggle, what she was really doing was she was coming to me to ask if she was okay.
Okay.
Right? She was saying, hey, are you looking at porn?
Hey, are you struggling right now?
Are you struggling right now?
Like, are you like, is that a problem? That girl over there that's super hot in the bikini? Is she a problem? Is she, like, it was most of the communication around pornography in the early years were all about trying to calm my own anxieties. Right? Like it was very much me trying to manage myself.
You initiating the
Through him.
conversation
Through
and
him,
seeing like,
you know?
what's the status?
Help me
Yeah.
feel better. Say
Yeah.
the things that I want you to say so I can feel better.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Be my Prince Charming here, solve all my problems.
Mhm.
And that was really tough for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't feel like I could really talk to her.
Okay. Yeah.
And Darcy's naturally anxious, as I think many women are. And
men.
And men,
And
right?
teenagers.
Humans are naturally anxious.
Mhm.
So things like I would come home and talk about my day at work, and sometimes it would have been a rough day, and Darcy would literally say, "Are you going to get fired?" Like, it didn't matter what I said to her. It didn't matter that I was really good at my job. It was, "Are you going to get fired?" Because she automatically and naturally goes to that worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And really, the most important part of communicating with your spouse around pornography is questioning your questions, asking yourself, am I asking this because I'm trying to solve something for me? Or am I asking this because I really actually want to know them? And intimacy is this really difficult thing that nobody actually wants, but we all say we do.
Yeah.
And knowing someone, knowing what's actually going on for them, knowing where they really are, knowing who they really are, even though that may cause you pain, is a very difficult thing to do, because we want, like, Darcy wants me to be a knight in shining armor. I want her to be the perfect mom and the perfect lover and the perfect everything, right? And when we actually know people,
Pretty close.
you are pretty close. That's true. When we actually know people,
there.
it's
Totally.
it's knowing the depth of that human that makes real intimacy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use a Harry Potter analogy, and if you don't know what Harry Potter is, it's okay.
Yeah,
But
I'm
there's
with
this
you.
character, right? There's this character named Severus Snape, and throughout all of the stories, he seems like this really bad dude. But when you get to the very end, what you realize is that he's not bad, he's not entirely good, but he's complicated, and that.
You gonna cry?
I am. I'm a crier. Like, that is what it means to be married, is to know complication and be able to handle it. And when it comes to communicating, when it comes to being a part of a structure like this, when it comes to being a structure like a marriage, recognizing that the person on the other side is not bad and they're not good, they're complicated, means that you shift the way that you think, you shift the way that you talk to them, you shift the way that you address them. And it really, if you start to know someone, it really highlights your own inability to handle discomfort. It highlights your own inability to see something you don't like and not make it about you. It really highlights a lot of the structural flaws in your own self that you have to then work on. And so when you're communicating, one of the things that you should be working on every single time you want to talk about something that's meaningful and deep and important is asking yourself, why is it that I feel the way that I feel about what's being told to me? Is it because it's making me insecure? Is it because it's making me uncomfortable? Is it because I don't like that they're doing this? And recognize that the communication that's happening is often two sides just sharing what's happening for them and making it mean completely different things.
Yeah.
And once you can start to parse through some of that, and it takes somebody guiding you through that process, showing you, okay, do you see how you're making this about you? Do you see how what you're sharing here isn't really a fair way of characterizing your behavior, right? Once you start to have somebody kind of point those things out to you, you can see more clearly how you've structured your life in a way that's about just kind of trying to protect the little bubble that is your brain and the immediate 1 foot around you.
Yeah.
And then you can actually begin to open up and say, oh, I'm not going to make what's happening for her about me, and I'm going to share what's happening with me to her and not make her reaction into anything more than that's what's going on for her. And that's not to say that I don't love her but like if she gets anxious about things, I don't get lost in her anxiety anymore.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't empathize, not to say that I don't think it's important to stay there and choose closeness. I just don't get lost in it.
Yeah, right. I feel like that's kind of where I'm trying to enter into that third marriage, right? Is like a lot of it is just like, oh, I'm so used to absorbing, my wife's emotions in particular, and like the practice of tolerating them without taking them in. And then somehow, remaining connected and like, we're still good. I still care and all of that. But yeah, you're really talking about this differentiation process. And I love that. Hey, I love that you cried talking about Harry Potter, which is amazing. But
I don't. It's embarrassing. I just
I cried.
I want everybody to see me as more manly.
I just take it as he just loves me so much.
I do.
Absolutely.
That's what it really is.
I'm kind of a crier myself. I cried when I watched Wreck-It Ralph. Just kids cartoon.
Anyway. I went to the movies with my daughter the other day, and I was like crying. I can't remember what it was that set me off, but I was just like, so bored. And then my daughter's like, "Are you crying? This movie's not even funny.
Stop embarrassing me." Yeah. Well, it came out with this idea of like kind of accepting our complications, and I think that's a really important piece to consider for so many viewers, I'm sure. I remember that there was a period of time where ton of shame, ton of self-criticism in my own life, and somebody got into the habit of like just like telling me like, "You're a good man, Taylor, right? You're a good man," and that felt so life-giving and so renewing. And after a few years of like trying to lean into that kind of as an affirmation, I realized I needed to take it one step further into just like, I'm just a man. Like I've got these good qualities, but I can't also ignore the reality of these things. So it wasn't, the self-criticism wasn't true, nor was the opposite of the self-criticism true. There was something of like kind of this in between, and just allowing myself to be really complex. And then by extension, like, I guess my wife gets that same permission, my kids, my coworkers and all of that. It really is an important step to understand the reality of human beings, which is like infinitely complex, and that the mixed bag of like, good and bad all rolled into one. So
yeah, absolutely.
And I think another thing was, instead of focusing so much on pornography as the topic of discussion, right? Because that was so much where when I would initiate, it was like I just wanted to know about the porn, like the porn, but it's so not about the porn, right? It's really about the underlying like struggles and emotions that are leading to the porn is what is so important to address and have those conversations about, right? I notice you're really stressed at work. Like, what's going on there? What's going on for you?
Yeah.
How are you handling that?
Yeah.
Have you thought of ways that you can address that or deal with that? Because I think for a lot of people, porn has been their number one go-to for dealing with things, even like super happy, like, right? Like, It doesn't always have to be negative. Like, some people really struggle with feeling super happy and amazing, right? Like, life can't be this good. It's too easy, right? Like, so I'm
gonna
self-sabotage.
Right?
Go look at porn, right? Like,
time to light something on fire,
right? Like, seriously, right? We as humans are often uncomfortable with emotions, whether they're painful or super good.
Yeah.
They're uncomfortable both ways,
Well, and I like to say porn is not the problem. It can be a problem, and it can be problematic, but it's not the problem. It's almost invariably a symptom of what is going on internally that you are not currently capable of resolving without learning some additional skills.
Yeah.
And that's a two-way street, right? Like Darcy and I, we came into this marriage at about the same level. And as we've grown, we have stayed at about the same level. Maybe she's a half a step ahead of me. Maybe I'm a half a step ahead of her. But it's not so much that, well, this is his problem. It's much more, neither of us really know how to deal with ourselves. So we can see this problem and use it as a catalyst to drive growth, Or I can stand, the wife or the person who feels injured can stand on one side and go, yeah, fix that. And when you're done with that, then you can have a marriage again. It's a really tough position to stand in for a couple of reasons. One, it's lonely. It really is. And two, it doesn't help your spouse because they don't know what to do. And so standing there and saying you need to resolve this before we can really have a marriage again, I would not recommend that. That was our experience for a little while, and it was painful. When we started to get on the same team, like it was us against porn, that's when the real work started to happen and the real change started to occur.
Yeah. Again, it's this kind of like this dialectic of like, we're clarifying like whose work is whose. We each have to work on self. And yet there is this quality of teamwork, as like we're kind of united in our efforts. Like I'm growing, you're growing, we're tackling problems through our personal development. And so, yeah, there's kind of that interesting balance of like, we still are invested, we still care, we're still connected. And yet we're really also paying attention to what is mine, what do I not pick up from you, what is, how do I not control?
Well, this is tough because too often what the spouse will say is, well, his pornography choices, I don't want to take blame for those. And they're not yours to be blamed for. It's really important to recognize that when I chose porn, it wasn't because of Darcy's behavior. Now, it is important also to recognize that when we create an environment, that environment contributes to behavior. And so in part, Darcy was a part of that environment, but she was never directly responsible for my choices. So that's a really tough thing to kind of parse out, because on the one hand, it feels like, well, it's not fair for the wife to take responsibility for his choices.
Right.
But on the other hand, it is fair for the wife to take responsibility for the way that she helps create an environment that he chooses to utilize as a reason for making choices, if that makes sense. That's a tough thing to parse.
Very nuanced. And yet, yeah, I think it is actually a really powerful position if we can kind of get that sense of like, yeah, I'm not responsible for the porn. His behaviors are his behaviors entirely and utterly. And I also co-create a relationship in which, these things are it's populating these problems, on a recurring basis.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
What I was going to say is I think we find sometimes that a husband comes and wants help, and a lot of times the wife doesn't. That's the truth of it. They're like, nope, his problem. He needs to solve it.
You go take care of it. Yeah.
Right. And I just think if your spouse, because the problem was there before we even got married, so this is his problem, right? I get it. But like if your spouse comes into your marriage with debt and you are now married, right? That debt is now a marriage problem, right? It is now something that needs to be addressed and taken care of in the marriage.
Yeah.
And so it's like, to me, I like to think any problem in a marriage is a marriage problem, right? Like it's not a one person problem, because a marriage is two people, and there's always work that can be done on both sides. And yeah, I didn't cause that debt. I don't have anything fancy to show for those credit cards that you brought into this marriage, but I do now have debt that needs to be dealt with. And so it's like,
yeah, it's a delicate balance of understanding what is yours, what's not yours, and how does this whole become your responsibility.
And I think it's really hard to think and really reflect on, how am I impacting my partner? Like, how do my actions and my behaviors and my attitudes impact my partner? I do impact him. And it is not, I'm never responsible for him choosing porn, ever. Never was, never will be, right? Like, that's not the thing. But I do make an impact.
Well, and on the flip side, you're not responsible for my choices, but I do impact. Like, my porn use is not about you, but I do impact you when I choose that.
Yeah.
And that's right. So you see how delicate this balance is, and how sometimes it might be valuable to take a step back and ask a third person to come in and help move through this with you.
Yeah, totally. Right. Because we can really tip into over responsibility for someone else, which invites control efforts, which maintains the pattern. And then we can tip over into total disengagement of like, hey, not my thing, not involved, and kind of ignoring the fact that there is some mutual influence going on still. We were looking for that sweet spot in the middle where we can claim what's ours, not claim what isn't, and yet still contribute to the overall experience of what it is to be in relationship with me.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I think, one thing that comes to mind for me, for instance, is like withholding sex, right? Like if I'm going to withhold sex until I feel safe, or whatever. Like if I think about that, okay, how am I impacting my partner in that? And how would that, the flip side, impact me?
mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think is interesting in that idea is, how am I taking responsibility for my own sense of safety? If the way that I think about safety is, he never does X ever again, and let's say it's porn, right? For me to feel safe, he never, for the rest of his life, will ever view pornography. I literally can't know the result of that experiment until we're all dead. That's a pretty tough place to be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think if you're willing to say, I am willing to take a risk, and I'm also willing to make sure that I am in charge of myself, there's a possibility that I'm going to get hurt.
always.
So,
Like I always say, like, partner could die tomorrow. That would hurt, right?
Mhm.
Like you don't get to, there's no magic formula in a marriage where there's not a risk of getting hurt.
right.
Yeah.
So safety's really not, safety is, it's really not an ideal that we should be searching for emotionally to an extent, right? In a healthy, I'm going to caveat that by saying, in a healthy, non-abusive relationship, safety is not, I don't think, necessarily the point. Appropriate risk is, I think, the point. Freedom to choose and not choose is the point. Willingness to struggle together is the point. But safety, I'm not sure, is exactly the right way to put it, because when we think about safety, I think we think about never being hurt and never having to struggle and never having to have our partner not be the person that we want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to me to be the framing that a lot of the betrayal world takes around this idea of safety. And I get it. I get why you'd want to be there. I get why being there feels good.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that being there is nearly an impossible task. I would say it's probably an almost absolutely impossible task. And so if we're looking for that ideal, we have to reevaluate, again, perspective.
Yeah.
What is a good perspective to bring to this?
Yeah.
Is my husband a good provider? Is he somebody who's willing to do the work? Is he somebody who is not happy with his behavior himself, and yet he struggles with it? That's a perspective that can tell us whether or not our partner's somebody that we may want to stay with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of not nice people out there, right? Like, is my husband a poor partner? And not monetarily, but mentally, emotionally, and physically? Is he somebody who is not invested in our relationship? Is he someone who takes advantage without recognizing that he's taking advantage? Is he someone who is unwilling to change or unwilling to see your perspective? Is he someone who is not striving to improve himself? That person may not be somebody that you choose to stay with. That person is never going to create a sense of freedom and joy and intimacy within your relationship unless he shifts.
Right. It's not a calculated risk you'd want to take.
It may not be, right? You may want to take that risk. It just depends on who you are and how you feel about the process. But being aware of the factors gives you a sense of, how do I move forward, knowing that none of them are safe.
Yeah. Developmental processes aren't what's that phrase? A ship is safe at harbor, but that's not what it's made for, kind of an idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a Canadian doctor named Jordan Peterson. He has a book called 12 Rules for Life, which is I think it's a great book. and he says, don't bother kids when they're skateboarding. And what he's saying is people to develop need to take risks. And that's what kids that are skateboarding are doing. They're trying to figure out what are the limits of their capacity.
Mhm.
And that is what each of us need to be doing is like, okay, what are the limits of my capacity? What can I handle? And what am I willing to handle? What am I not willing to handle?
Yeah. Man, I've loved our discussion. We've covered a lot, and I like the nuance that we've gotten to. I think this is really hard for us to see until we experience people kind of talking these ideas out. And viewers, I mean, if there's stuff here that you're like, I got to think about that a little bit more, I'd invite you to think about it more.
Totally
right?
normal to even maybe listen to this and go, I don't like what they're saying.
Yes.
Right? That might be your first reaction is, oh, I hate what they're saying. And then it's like, okay, why do I hate that?
Yeah, to get curious about that.
What is it pushing on in me? What makes me uncomfortable about that?
Yeah. But I do love and appreciate the nuance, because I think when even just one partner in the relationship starts to get it, it's a strong invitation for the other one to kind of move forward as well. And we can start to resolve dilemmas, whether it's pornography or any other problem. Those things are kind of the ways in which we're called up into, refining our relationship with ourselves and how we relate to the people and the world around us. So now, if you guys are, as viewers, if you are interested in learning more from the Spafford's perspective, you guys have a free masterclass as a really good starting step. Anything you want to say about that? Like what's covered, or what would they expect from that?
We're in the process of redoing it right now, and it's going to be both of our lovely faces.
Right now, if you go to our website right now today, which is October 4th, this is coming out
20. Yeah, I think we'll actually have you on the 25th.
Okay, so on the 25th, by then you'll see the new version, which is both of us. And really, we're talking about the three major shifts that you need to be doing to create a thriving marriage. And it is
around
pornography or beyond pornography, really. And this is really the point, right? You have to know what it is to do, and then start doing it. Even when you're going to fail, you're going to fail. Like nobody's going to go through this course one time and be like, oh yeah, I got it all down, I'm all set.
Yeah,
you're
Some
going to
people
fail.
But
well,
not the first time, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't had anybody who hasn't failed at least once. And when I say fail, like make a misstep in this process, because it's about a learning curve that you just don't know how to do this yet, and that's okay. Take the time, start to learn, and if you want to, get some help on it, let us know. You can go to zachspafford.com/free call and watch the webinar. Once you're done watching the webinar, you can set up a free call with me, zachspafford.com/work with me. If you or you can set up a free call with Darcy. I've had I can't tell you how many wives are like, hey, can I start working with Darcy? My husband's not ready, but I know what Darcy has is what I need. And that starts the process. And it's a huge shift. My favorite is when they get about halfway through their sessions and then the spouse is like, can I do it now?
Can I join?
Yeah. And absolutely. That's the work. We want to help everybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, viewers, again, I hope that this has stirred some things up. I hope it's gotten you to reflect on kind of where you're at in your overall process and how you frame your understanding of the porn dilemma that may be in your marriage. So take a look at that free resource. It'll be down below the video. So just click the link, head on over there and get access to it so you can kind of find those. It was 3 steps to a marriage thriving beyond porn or something. Yeah.
The 3 shifts you need to have a marriage thriving beyond pornography.
Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, we'll call it there. Darcy, Zach, thank you guys so much. It's been a pleasure. I loved our discussion today. I know it's going to bring a lot of value. So appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Thrive Beyond Pornography. If you're seeking guidance and support to overcome pornography for good and begin creating a thriving life beyond it, check out my free webinar, How to Overcome Pornography with Skills That Actually Work. You'll learn practical, proven skills guided by an expert coach who has personally overcome pornography. Whether you're getting started for just yourself or along with your spouse, Darcy and I can teach you the tools that will help you put your life on the right path for you. Be sure to check out the show notes for a direct link, and if you could take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, it would mean the world to us. Your reviews play a significant role in helping others discover the show so they can join us on this transformative journey. Thank you for being part of the Thrive Beyond Pornography community. Until our next episode, stay strong, stay focused, and keep thriving.